Russell, welcome, sir.
Hey Tim, how you doing, my man? Haven't
Hey,
seen you
pretty
in
good.
ages.
We're 2 minutes early. Do you need a sec, or how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm just finishing up a cheeseburger.
Oh no, that's cool. Hey, you know what? This is like, trust me, this is like casual Saturday. So I
I
was out
just
doing.
hadn't had anything to eat all day, so I was starving. It's like I couldn't go on the show without having something to eat.
So you're down in Florida, right? Are you in Florida? Or are you
hmm
still okay? Did you see the Northern Lights, or was that too far south?
No, we're like subtropical, so the Earth's magnetic field is much stronger down here because we're closer to the equator.
Okay, okay,
So
yeah.
no northern lights for us.
So I went out last night. Just like because again we got a couple of minutes. Mark Sokol called me. He's like, "You gotta go out and get photos." I'm like, "Okay." So I take the camera out, and I had the perfect position. I didn't see anything. What looked kind of like wispy clouds, and I was just too much city light, I guess. So I went out into the country. And again, I look up and I see these wispy, kind of striated clouds, and I'm like, "Well, they look like clouds," but I was like, "I've never really seen clouds look like that." So
What
then I
color?
put
What color were they? Green?
no, so to the naked eye, they were white. That's the part that got me. I
Hmm.
swear to God, they were just white, wispy. It looked like just kind of, like light marine layer, just a little bit different shaped. And then when I put the camera on them, the camera picked up the green and the pink. So I, I don't know. I mean, I've always heard, like you see photos of the Northern Lights, it's always green and pink and blue and all that,
Yeah,
right?
I've
But like,
seen the northern lights. They're like beautiful, mostly green with maybe some red thrown in, but yeah, just alpha and beta particles from the sun,
yeah.
and they come in at the poles because that's where the Earth's magnetic field is weakest.
So I think that I was right under where this event hit us, I guess. That was what my brother was out taking photos too, and I think he kind of mentioned that in one of his Facebook posts. If you want, I could here look, you know what? I'll put up a couple of photos for you. Again, we got a minute here. I'll torture the audience.
Actually, it's 4 o'clock right now. That's what I got.
Oh, do you have a sec? I can come back
Yeah,
to
I
these
sure
later.
do. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay. Well, we'll do that. I'll show everybody real quick. I'm kind of pumped about this. Okay, so yeah, here. These are my photos. This one is not the best. I had to
Yeah,
stitch together a
that's the
bunch.
northern lights. Yep, that's what they look like. Yep.
Yeah, and that's the pole. So they're not actually over the polar region. So up in the Seattle area, you're actually able to see.
Yeah, well, in intense solar storms like we're having, they come down to more southerly latitudes.
Yeah, and that's actually White Rock, British Columbia. So I was shooting just over the border. This is later at night though, and you can see there's a lot of city light from Vancouver that's kind of blocking them out. So those are mine. And then my brother, who I keep telling people he is a much better photographer than I am, he picked up that one. See, but
hmm
he actually knows how to use a camera. I just kind of, point and push the button. So we got some good photos, and supposedly there's going to be more happening this evening. So I guess we'll see.
Well, I hope
We'll
it
see if we
doesn't
can.
take out the internet because it's rumored to possibly that to happen because it's one of the most intense solar storms, the high solar maximum.
Yeah, we'll find out. Um, well, so Russell, you've got two presentations. Let me see. You've got I can't even read them. You've got your Kofi, and then you've got the Spintronics. Which one do you want me to put up first?
Why don't we put up the Spintronics?
Okay. And I should mention to people, so you have worked with Surl in terms of the Surl effect, right? I can't go through the whole history of this, but there are only 2 or 3 people in the world who have any expertise or knowledge. You are one of them, right? And I mean,
Correct.
yeah, so again, I cannot thank you enough for joining us and walking us through this. You've
Yeah.
worked
Well,
with
actually, yeah.
John Surl.
Why don't we do the this one first? The artificial gravity, electromagnetic propulsion, because that's what it
Okay.
is, and
Yeah.
that's a nice graphic of the S.E.G. Surl effect generator, which we now call the spintronic generator, since Professor Surl copyrighted his name in 2014. So we just call it the spintronic generator, which is the effect that
Okay.
we're seeing.
Well, let me do this. I'm gonna take myself out, and there are back and forth buttons for slides right on it. You can click right through. Just let me know.
Oh, great.
I think, yeah, and I'll put the
Uh-huh.
next one up when you're ready. Thank you again, man.
Okay, well, let me see if I can control this myself. Yes, I can. Okay. Inverse gravity vehicles, that's the vehicle that resulted from Professor Surl's technology. The original generator or converter itself was not supposed to be a flying machine. It was just supposed to be a unique kind of electrical generator. Well, when they started it up in a field, it was first built at British Rewinds and Repairs in London. When they started it up in an open field with a diesel generator to get things going, because the fields weren't correct. If the fields are absolutely true on your plates and runners, which are the rings and rollers, you don't have to run anything or do anything. Um, it's really interesting the way this thing works, and it started putting out far more voltage than anybody thought, than anybody expected, and very high voltage, smell of ozone, and then it got really started spinning really fast, and just lifted up, got up to about maybe 30-40 feet in height, and a pink halo surrounded it. And then radio receivers, TV receivers around the area would go on of their own accord, full volume. So that's some kind of electromagnetic induction effect there. And then after the device developed a pink halo around it, it took off for parts unknown, straight up. So that's really was quite a surprise. After 5 more generators were lost in that manner, they said, well, if it wants to fly, this thing wants to fly. Professor Surl and his team said, let's give it a body so we can control it. And the obvious shape of the body is a saucer body. So yeah, that's the cover of the DVD, the John Surl story. Very soon, we hope to get that site back up and running and sell some more DVDs, and also direct downloads for anyone who wants to purchase and find out about this technology. Anyway, I got started back in the day, way back in the day, in the 1980s in electrogravitics, and I built Thomas Townsend Brown's saucers. He's the guy on the right. I built his flying saucers right from the patent. That's patent number 2949550. And I built them and flew them around a custom tower and rotor apparatus, and they worked even better than what was stated and what was claimed in the patent. So they're just a simple capacitor, parallel plate capacitor, and the whole idea with these things is to store as much charge as possible. You store the charge, that's what makes them go. Store the charge with as little leakage as possible. Now let's see. Yeah, I've been lecturing for many years since 1990. Nikola Tesla Club, Tesla Tech in first Colorado Springs, then Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I've been all over talking about Surl technology and how we want to get it funded and back up and running for good and all. And then I've been demonstrating anti-gravity electrogravitic systems, my own large beam ship models that are based on Thomas Townsend Brown's patent number 2949550, which was granted August 16th, 1960. And let's see. There's supposed to be a video there, but I don't think that the videos are going to be working on this presentation. They don't really work on SteamYard. I don't know why. And there's one of my 6-foot diameter beam ships, and they just take off and go with very low power, maybe only about 60 watts, maybe 40,000 volts at 1.5 milliamps. And yeah, and here I am in Albuquerque, New Mexico, back in 2010, when we were there lecturing with Professor Surl. And I built and presented along to support Professor Surl's lectures this 1-to-1 scale model of the Surl levity disc or inverse gravity vehicle, all out of polystyrene. And yeah, that's actual size of the P11 and P12 series craft that were flown from Warminster and stored in Archangel, Russia, because there was no place to house it for safety back in the United States. And there's some Surl inverse gravity vehicles flying around the Golden Gate Bridge in beautiful city of San Francisco. Yeah, and here I am with Professor Surl back in 2010 in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Sat down and talked with him for over 3 hours. That was my first face-to-face meeting with him. And yeah, he invited me on the team back in 2007. He said, "We like your work. We like your knowledge of our technology, of my technology. We'd like you on our team." So, of course, who was I to refuse? That was my dream made reality. And here I am at my old home base in Pennsylvania on the right-hand side with a C-57D Starship from the 1956 MGM movie Forbidden Planet. Forbidden Planet featured a spacecraft, a starship, faster than light, that looked exactly like, pretty much almost exactly like the Surl inverse gravity vehicle or levity disk. And yeah, Professor Surl is just an amazing man, an amazing mind that is able to work on many levels simultaneously. And he would have a problem that would seemingly be intractable, and he'd go to sleep and wake up with the answer. It's just amazing. S.E.G's theory of gravitation. Yeah, gravitation is just a converging flux of ether, or the background of space fabric, converging into the center of a body of mass and comes into the Earth. And when it gets near the Earth's surface, is right along the plumb line. Right along the plumb line to the center of the Earth is the vector we call gravitation. So all forces act in pairs. Gravitation is a push as well as a pull to the center of mass of a body, anybody. And here we were in China back in 2013, a little over 10 and a half years ago, presenting Surl technology, our working mock-up, working demo unit. I'm sitting right behind it. And some of our Chinese helpers from our Chinese contingent, which we had. I don't think we have that anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, we demonstrated for the people of Beijing the Surl technology in working models. Yeah, and here are some photos of Professor Surl. Professor Surl is a young boy, upper right-hand corner. Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla. Oh gosh, Paul A. LaViolette, I think, is there. Yep. Thomas Townsend Brown. Yeah, and some photos of the levity disk. So the early team back in the 1960s, early 70s, working on various size models, both static and flying. There's a photo of a model flying over Warminster from the top and from the bottom. The top is always very bright when they're operating. They're very bright on top, and like a dark mirror on the bottom. Professor Surl said, which is really interesting. It shows the conversion of ether or space fabric, and the field strength of ether is really off the charts. It's more energy than we can possibly imagine. Something like 10 to the 97th grams per cubic centimeter equivalent mass energy. So basically 1 cup of vacuum has the field strength and energy density to boil off all the Earth's oceans, which is quite staggering indeed. That's the magnitude of power that the Surl effect generator and the inverse gravity vehicle to control it in flight is converting. More than enough power to send this thing off. And Professor Surl said it would have no problem going up to the speed of light. But I'm thinking, since it has no inertia, no inertial mass at those voltages, which are about 10 to the 12, 10 to the 13 volts, the speed of light shouldn't be a problem, because the faster you go in these things, you don't get heavier. The device doesn't get heavier and heavier and heavier because inertial mass has been canceled. In fact, Dr. Gabriel Lippmann stated that inertial mass is not based on amount of material in a small space or in any space. It's just solely based on net charge, something no one expected and something we are not taught. And he later won the Nobel Prize for something completely unrelated. So if a body has a net negative charge, it's going to have less inertia. If a body has a net positive charge, it's going to have more inertia. And he called this the inertia of static electricity. And the S.E.G, the Surl effect generator, spintronic generator, is the first electrostatic generator which consists solely of permanent magnets. Now, the law of the squares is a mathematical system that Professor Surl, it came to him in a series of 2 oddly recurring dreams that happened twice a year from age 4.5 to age 10. The same 2 dreams that happened twice a year. Well, 2 squared, he learned later, is a very important number and very important concept in mathematics. Well, 2 squares 4. Well, these squares have 4 verticals, 4 horizontals, and 4 diagonals. If you have the numbers in these squares, these matrices, if you have them sequential, the outputs are all different. The sums of the verticals, horizontals, and diagonals are all different. But if you randomize the numbers, and I saw Professor Surl, stood behind Professor Surl on stage and watched him do this right in front of me. If you randomize those numbers, the outputs are all uniform, 34, 34, 34, all the way around the verticals, horizontals, and diagonals. So that is basically a graphical representation of the coherence, of the cohering, the way nature does, of the random energy of the ether. And the history of magic or Latin squares dates back thousands of years to the pyramids of ancient Egypt, possibly further back to the first Chinese dynasties, which is in fact true. In fact, the Chinese people, as I found out when we went to China a little over 10.5 years ago, they still use magic squares for cutting and trimming bonsai trees to the correct mathematical ratios of the nature of nature. By understanding these natural laws, one can argue that the universe exists according to precise mathematical laws. The law of the squares or magic squares is not a new technology, but an old, ancient technology that's been reborn after Professor Surl, at a young age, developed it independently and discovered his numbered matrix has 3 dimensions, 3-dimensional properties that can model the quantum energy states of mass. And there are 3 groups of squares. Group 1, 2, and 3, and there can be no others. Group 1 squares consist of all odd numbers. All even numbers that are divisible by 4 are in group 2. All the rest of the even numbers not divisible by 4 are in group 3. And we use group 2 square for the to make the generators. And basically, group 1 oscillates, group 2 square rotates, and number 3 square oscillates except for the center cross, which rotates. Now, here are some more representations of what we see in this device and similar devices in its class. So group 1 squares oscillating, or rotating rather. Group 2 is oscillating, and group 3 rotating and oscillating. It oscillates except for the center cross, which rotates. And then the law of the squares tells us, and we have tables, complete tables, on how much material of each material tells us how much material and the ratios of those materials in whatever space you want to fill with S.E.G or spintronic generator. Yeah, it's a complete numerical system that is almost like, it's a computer. It's a computer without the hardware. It's really, really interesting the way that goes together. And so we have tables of data for whatever size generator we want to build so we can build it correctly. And we're going to be building you have to have at least 4 chemical elements, which includes an insulator of some thermoplastic material. The insulator keeps a charge from building up and then dissipating, and building up and dissipating. And what goes through the generator, the current that goes through the generator, no matter what the voltage is, the current never exceeds 1.5 milliamperes. And the current is not normal fermion current, it's boson current. A boson current just consists of 2 electrons or an electron pair, a Cooper pair. Or electrons they get to a certain distance, a very close distance, they're not allowed to bump around and create heat. They simply spiral around each other, and they follow the lines of magnetic force to the surface of the plates and runners, and they gain energy with each stage or each incremental distance through the materials until at a certain point they're leaving the materials at high energy. They're leaving the materials and the rim of the generator in radial fashion at almost the speed of light, relativistic speeds. So notice here on the left-hand side square, you have the numbers sequential. You get all different outputs for the verticals, horizontals, and diagonals. But when you randomize those numbers, as I watched Professor Surl do, those numbers all come out uniform, 34, 34, 34 for the verticals, horizontals, and diagonals. And the law of the squares is based on supersymmetry. And like light, magnetism is broken down into its spectrum components, then utilized to generate a resonant magnetic wave. resonant magnetic wave. That's kind of important. Let me go on ahead. What happens when you bring a runner to a plate is that composite moving magnetic waveform is generated like a sine wave. But it's more than that. It's almost like an Archimedes water screw. So look at the bottom right. You see you have a sine wave and a cosine waveform. And the sine wave is on the plate. The cosine wave is on the runner. So notice at the center line at the block walls of each plate and runner where there is no magnetic field, where north converts into south and vice versa, those fields, those vectors are at right angles. You have to have that or it won't work. So that's very important. And those magnetic waves consist of magnetic bubbles called maxills that are most powerful near the edges and least powerful and smaller near the center of each plate and runner, or each ring and roller. The plates are the stator. The rollers are a rotor, a segmented rotor. You could think of it like that. And nominal voltage this thing puts out is about 100,000 volts. Again, at 1.5 milliamps. And that is way more voltage than anyone expected. Of course, with no load on it, well, actually, it pours out a load into a corona surrounding it. And the higher the voltage, the less air pressure is around this whole system. And if unrestrained, it will continue to pour out power into a corona surrounding the device. And the voltage just goes to insane levels. Current still stays at 1.5 milliamps, and it just takes off. The combined field from the earth and the device just pushes it away. Obviously, the earth can't move out of the way, so the device moves out of the way. And because of this field, a highly negative field at the rim and highly positive at the center, the device is basically repelled by the rim from the earth. So the center is positive. So all electrons from the environment or from space itself, from the vacuum itself, think of the vacuum as pre-electrons. All that goes into the center ring, the centermost area of the center ring, because that's the most positive, and electrons being negative tend to seek out the most positive source in the area. So it takes the device takes one electron from the neodymium or whatever rare earth you're using in the matrix, and one electron from the environment. And those link up to become a Cooper pair and are utilized by the device. Well, what is the Surl effect? The Surl effect is based on a unique process of magnetization. Oh, are you driving in? Oh, okay. Can we do a switch later?
What?
So I can get something to eat, because I wanted to go to the store to get something to eat.
All right.
All right, thanks. Yeah. It's my grandson. But anyway, sorry, I'll get back to the program. The Surl effect is based on a unique process of magnetization where specific waveforms are imprinted onto the materials. The materials are magnetized in a way that is not practiced in today's industry, nor is John Searle's method taught in conventional electronic engineering schools. When those materials are in motion, the waveforms begin to interact and produce electricity. In addition to producing electricity, the S.E.G gets very, very cold and generates a negative charge within its vicinity. So the more load you put on it, the faster this thing runs, and the colder and lighter it gets, and the less atmospheric pressure there is in the device, until it's riding in a vacuum, sitting in its own self-made vacuum. Higher the voltage, the stronger the vacuum. And studies show that negative charges kill bacteria and viruses, and also make wounds heal much faster. That's also been shown. You can see those videos on YouTube where electricity heals wounds much, much faster. So one of these generators needs to be in every hospital burn ward and operating theater, because it's like a negative ion generator on steroids, basically. Professor Surl was in an explosion, lab explosion, and the whole right side of his face was badly burned. But because he was asked to be taken home, because they had dressed him up like a mummy, within days, a couple of days, everything was almost completely healed. First, the pain goes away, and then rapid healing takes place. So there's no time to form scar tissue. Scar tissue occurs with slow healing and infections. But this device, it's like a negative ion generator on steroids, kills bacteria, cleans the air as it runs. So it needs to be in every home for a healthy environment. And you can run anything on it depending on your peripheral coil windings, which are pickup coils. You can power anything you want at any voltage you want. And you're just generating electricity in the normal way by cutting lines of magnetic force at right angles to a conductor. But in this case, you have cold current, boson pairs, Cooper pairs, like two figure skaters that have locked arms together and spinning around each other rapidly. That's the type of power we're dealing with. And it's negative power in this device. Not our positive AC power. Our AC is positive polarity. And stop. It's my cat. Positive polarity. This is negative polarity. So it makes a healthy environment, and devices and systems don't lose electrons over time. They with this system. So everything is going to last a lot longer. And this is a layered version, which was never built. A layered version of the system. The systems that were built were homogeneous systems. In other words, mixed together with turbulent flow in an argon environment, argon gas environment. You have to do everything with in an argon environment because we're pressing powders to make these devices. When you press powders that are that small, or you're using powders that are that small, especially rare earths, they oxidize very, very rapidly. And you don't want any oxygen to get to these things before you press them, sinter them, magnetize them, and then coat them with a very light layer of a nickel plating or something similar to preclude oxidation of these plates and runners. And there's the sine wave on the plate, cosine on the runner. When you bring a runner to a plate, you make a combined field, a composite field, which is a rotating field, which consists of this sine wave that really, if you're looking at it in 3 dimensions instead of 2, looks like an Archimedes water screw, a combined rotating wave, and the runners are just carried along in the troughs of that rotating wave. It's pretty simple when you think about it. And toroidal fields in nature, they're found all over nature. Toroid is like a donut, but a spinning donut, also a vortex. So think of the toroid going around the device. It consists of basically 3 or 4 rotating fields, a rotating electrical field, which is an electrostatic field, negative at the periphery, positive at the very center, a rotating magnetic field, which is a dynamagnetic field, a magnetostatic field, and another electrical field, which is a moving electrical field, which generates very, very little current, only about 1.5 milliamps. So that is not enough current to deflect a compass needle. So because of the high voltages in this system, you want to have optical controls in this system. Basically, instead of electrical, everything running on electricity, you want light signals, although you can run it on electricity if you want. But you get better fail-safes with light-activated systems like fiber optics. Yeah, you see toroids all over nature. I'm a musician, so I know the treble clef and the bass clef, which is the G clef and the F clef. They follow that same pattern of spiral nature, which is everything. Victor Schauberger's repulsine device depends on the same things the Surl effect depends on. The way nature operates, implosion and falling temperature, not explosion and heat energy. Nature doesn't work like that. So the Surl system is consistent and congruent with the laws of nature, and so is not destructive. Nothing is being broken apart. No atoms are being broken apart. No molecules are being broken apart. Instead, we have integration at the hubs, at the center, and you could call it disintegration or elimination of electrons high speed from the rim. It's really interesting, and we see this all over in nature. The Fibonacci spiral of increasing curvature, that's the way electrons from the environment come into the center of the device and link up with a free electron, and neodymium or any other rare earth has plenty, well, actually 2, which is more than enough, free electrons on its outer 4f and 5f band shells. And those electrons are highly mobile and ready to go. They're ready to power our society and whatever else we want. So you see these vortices, and vortices all over in nature, tornado about to form, whirlpool, hurricane, and of course a spiral galaxy, not unlike billions and trillions of galaxies that are out there, like our Milky Way galaxy that we reside in. And you have an interesting vortexian pattern is seen all over nature, even our fingerprint, call it the fingerprint of God, our DNA, a double helix, and a light wave, matter, energy, and that's a photon. That's a model of a photon. A photon can be thought of as a smeared particle. It's a wave as well as a particle, a wavicle. And that's Surl gyrocell. We call it a gyrocell in its basic form. Single plate, which is a ring, and 12 runners. All you need is one runner and one plate to demonstrate the effect. And the runners in the actual device, the runners don't touch the plate at all. They do in the demo device, but in the actual device, there is a Hall effect because of the magnetic fields and the materials that are used in it. So the runners fly around the plate. They orbit and rotate around the plate. And all you need is one runner and one plate. And that's in our project plan. The first milestone is one runner going around the plate. That is it. So it's the first electrostatic generator that consists solely of permanent magnets in the form of cylindrical bars and annular rings. And in the flying unit, you have three sets of these, three concentric sets of plates and runners, or rings and rollers. And there's a proposed layered version, which Professor Surl said would be a little more difficult to build, but it might work even better than the homogeneous mixture version. And I saw a video, I have a video of Professor Surl experimenting with those magnets in 1980s and early 90s. I got a VHS tape bought from our late team member, John Thomas, which was a 4-hour Surl lecture from, I guess, Munich, Germany, 1989. And at that lecture, he received from Munich University an honorary doctorate in, I think it was mathematical structures and engineering. So the collector is the neodymium element layer, collector of electrons and source of electrons, just like a reservoir is a source of water for a town or a municipality. The neodymium is a reservoir of electrons, and nature replaces those electrons readily. So an endless source of electrons is in any rare earth, and we use neodymium number 60 on the periodic table. Then we have a gate, a dielectric layer of a thermoplastic material, and Professor Surl was using nylon 66. And then notice that all the elements that are used in this device are very, very highly negatively charged on the triboelectric series of elements. And nylon 66 certainly has a negative charge. And we can also make this nylon electret material, and we can do the same thing in the homogeneous mixture version. Basically, we have nylon pellets, and we melt them, bring them to Curie point, and then we zap them with a negatively charged Van de Graaff. Well, most Van de Graaffs are positively charged unless we feed in electrons from a high voltage source onto the belt. So that's what we'll do, is spray electrons onto the belt, and then negative charges are fed into the thermoplastic material. When it cools, it maintains that charge and becomes an electrical dipole, and it's the electrical equivalent of a permanent magnet. So instead of a magnet, it's an electret. Electrets are very, very important in free energy work. And then you have an accelerator of a magnetized iron layer, and the magnetics are only on the surface of the plates and runners. And then you have an emitter of copper or aluminum, and you have to have a paramagnetic layer or paramagnetic element in the matrix, and that's very important. And there's our mock-up, which I have here down in Florida, running. Runs pretty well, extremely well. It's very, very simple. You just put a voltage, about 6 volts over the runners and the plate, and off they go, 6 volts at 500 milliamps to get those heavy magnets moving. And the Barrett report shows if you put probes on the center of a plate and the periphery of a plate, or the center of a runner, periphery of a runner, you can register anywhere from 5 to 12 volts. So these plates and runners are, think of them as spin batteries. They're permanent batteries. And then when you spin the runners, the effect of that voltage is enhanced markedly, but the current never exceeds 1.5 milliamperes. But the voltages can go to insane levels. And there's a proposed model of a layered version. See, the nominal spintronic generator or Surl effect generator consists of 3 concentric plates or rings and 3 concentric runners. The innermost plate has to have at least 12 runners if you want to generate power. That's very important. Running in the lab. Yeah, a field of ions is generated that spreads outward, as well as reduced atmospheric pressure. The higher the voltage, the less the pressure. The air is just pushed away from the rim. At higher voltage, everything is pushed away. It goes cryogenic, and the earth pushes the device away. Anything that approaches the rim at those insane voltages, takeoff voltage, which is about 4 Kelvin at some 10 to the 12 volts at 1.5 milliamps, anything that approaches the rim is pushed away. Anything that's less than the mass of the device, the combined mass of the device, is pushed away from the rim, turned away from the rim. First it's attracted, then violently repelled, becomes physically impossible to bring anything near the rim. That's what we call a force field. And anything greater than the mass of the device is repelled. So this thing, if it's going in deep space at relativistic velocities or above the speed of light, it can't hit anything, micrometeoroids and even cosmic rays. Well, cosmic rays would be sucked in to the center of the device if they're a negative polarity and used by the device. And anything else is just pushed away by the positive or negative polarity of the rim. And that's what the magnetic field should look like. On the plates and runners, they should look like wagon wheel spokes. They're basically gears, helical magnetic gears. They're not straight up and down. They have a helical cut. And there's all kinds of advantages to helical cut gears. Out of magnetic fields. That's very important because this thing is a magnetic bearing. It's on a magnetic bearing, and it is basically a magnetic motor in rotary form, a magnetic induction motor. And 10 years ago, down here in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, actually Oakland Park, which is the next town over from Fort Lauderdale, we built small models, working models with neodymium magnets of linear and then rotary motors, magnetic motors that worked. They're based on the paradigm motor and another motor, which escapes me right now, the V-gate motor. They were based on that, and they worked really great. They worked extremely well. So we'll be using some prototypes, making some prototypes on the V-gate magnetic waveform, as well as the traditional Surl effect magnetic waveform. That has milestones, and so we can hit the ground running when we get funding, and we're seeking funding. Anybody out there, sending out a call to all who are qualified investors who have the wherewithal to support this work, please seek us out. We need your help so we can duplicate this work here in Florida and replicate the work that was done back in the day, 30, 40, 50, 50 years ago in England, 60 years ago, and longer, 70 years ago in the early 50s. And here's a glass S.E.G, operational prototype in 1989, consisting of regular, ordinary ferrite magnets, not law of the squares magnets, just ordinary ferrite magnets, just to show that you can get continuous rotation. And it has cams and levers in the center that once you set this thing in motion, it will just keep on going. Professor Surl built that in Germany back in 1989. And here's basically what's happening with this system. You have time-varying magnetic fields, but they violate Lenz's law. When you get a change in the magnetic field, there's no magnetic torque trying to slow the system down and heat it up. That's total violation of Lenz's law. That's important. No other generator has this geometry. That's in violation of Lenz's law and other cherished physical laws. Like, of course, in the flying version, Newton's third and first laws of motion, and the conservation of energy law is clearly broken in this system. And there's Hamel's device. Hameltech creates electrostatics just like in a thunderstorm, with air rushing down through these cones that are in opposing magnets, opposing magnetic systems. There's Hamel's flying saucer, Hameltech. Look at the book, The Granite Man and the Butterfly, for information on Hameltech. It's another working flying disc model. There's some alien technology that utilizes two inner tubes of ferrofluids to generate insane voltages for flight. This device, this craft, is also a flying electrostatic generator. Notice the separation between the upper hull and lower hull. The flight means are basically very similar, if not identical, to Thomas Townsend Brown's flight means and Professor John Surl's flight means. Laws of nature, as far as we know, work the same all over the universe. And there's some more alien craft taken in front of a hill somewhere in Switzerland. It's a drone craft, maybe 5 meters, and then a 7-meter man craft on top. Now, there's a depiction of the craft, of the flying craft known as a levity disc first back in the day, and now known as an inverse gravity vehicle, because we are now certain that gravity is reversed in this device. They put the device, basically, when it's in flight, can do insane flips and reversals of direction, instant starts and stops at many times the speed of sound, with no sonic boom, of course. Basically, and again, just like Gabriel Lippmann discovered, inertia is canceled by high energy electrostatics. So the device has no inertia. It runs cryogenic, it runs cold. There's no consumption of oxygen. There's no heat energy. There's no vibration. There's no noise. It's a perfect flying system. There's no limit to the speed as far as we know. And you can see an enlarged Surl effect generator inside the framework of the levity disc or inverse gravity vehicle, enlarged for clarity. And the shells, just like the Demo 1, the 20-footer, which is the last model built, are clear. So you can see the inner workings. And then you have 64 flight cells at the rim adjacent to the generator, with a load cell, which is basically a pin, a very sharp needle or a pin that puts a load on the atmosphere to put the device into a superconductive state for flight. This is a superconducting, high temperature superconducting device, about 4 Kelvin, 256 degrees below zero at flight voltage. And because of the high energy electrostatics, this device polarizes the ether, polarizes the vacuum. So you have ahead of the device a positive polarity field. Well, positive polarities are attractive on matter. And just under the device and behind the device, a negative polarity field. Negative polarity fields are repulsive on matter. So you have basically a wave in space. And this device is a wave rider that rides this wave of electrically modified space-time. The ether is not a physical thing. We can only get it electrically, according to Sir Oliver Lodge. And there's the P-11 flying in Warminster, England. That's about maybe 30 feet up in the air. No noise, no fuel, no heat, no vibration. This is the system we should have been using to get into space since the early 60s. Not the German rockets, which were basically borrowed from Robert Goddard's liquid fuel rocket patents. The Saturn V is basically a glorified V2 rocket. But this device does not produce deafening noise or any noise. This device does not use any fuel. This device utilizes the ferromagnetic spins and electron spins at the heart of matter, basically, to create safely a very, very high voltage field, negative at the periphery, positive at the center or hub. And off it goes with no inertia. Pilots, when they used to see these things, Professor invited pilots to come see these things fly at the Sunday afternoon flight demos in Warminster. And the pilots would say, no way am I getting that thing, I'd be squashed. But they put a small vial of some radioactive material that was so fragile that it would break with the slightest load. When they took it up and whipped it around, did all its maneuvers and brought it back down, the vial was still intact. They put accelerometers inside, and they found that in the center of the device where the flight deck is, there's 1/2 G onboard gravitation. 1/2 G onboard gravitation. So again, this device is electromagnetically creating artificial gravity. So there's your unifying field in Einstein's completed unified field theory for gravitation and electricities, or an Einheit-Lichtenfeld theory, which was published January 29th in Annalen der Physik, a Prussian science journal in High German, and then published January 12th, 1929, republished in the New York Times with great fanfare. And gravitation and electromagnetism are utilized and put into the same equation, put into a unifying equation. And yet that is not taught in our schools. I wonder why. And there I am, putting finishing touches on a model that is a 1:1 scale model, the P11. Now the P11 weighed 4.5 tons, 4.5 tons. And most of that weight was in the generator. The generator those magnets are extremely heavy. And it's a very large generator, about 8 or 9 feet in diameter. And 64 struts make up the structure of the craft, and 64 flight cells for control. You're controlling the device from outside. There I am again. There's Professor Surl, 1932. Well, he died December 4th of, December 4th of 2018. The patent for the spintronic generator came out January 16th. It was published by the USPTO January 16th of 2018. So Professor Surl got to live to see his patent realized. So, and our company, Spintronics Inc., owns that patent, and no one has challenged that patent. So we're free to go. Any investors that invest in Spintronics so we can make these devices, both the generators and the flying devices, is protected. Yep, there it is, about maybe 25, 30 feet up in the air in that same field in Warminster, which you can go to, P11 craft. That was, I believe, July 4th of 1969. And there's a P11 size craft. I believe that is a P11, about 10, 11 foot diameter, with a radio controlled walkway. And they were controlled on 12 meter band ham radio. And they were controlled at various ground stations, people that had ham radio that were part of the team, with a special code, with a 12 meter band military surplus ham radio. That was the only frequency that could get through the force field. There's the stairway. The stairway comes down from the center, and so the passengers won't accidentally touch the hull, because the hull is a capacitor. You touch that hull at that voltage, you're dead. You do not want to touch that. And the legs are like kneeling, hydraulically powered kneeling landing legs, because you don't want it too close to the earth, because if you switch on the drive suddenly, it'll take up a chunk of sod that will basically stick to the bottom center of the craft. Remember, high energy electrostatics is identical to a gravitational field. Yeah, these were actual flying craft. And there it is, ready to fly with the kneeling legs extended, so you don't take up a chunk of sod upon lifting off suddenly. There's the Demo 1 21-footer, 7-meter craft, which was the final one built. That was the last one built. The ring at the outside is where the generator goes, the S.E.G Surl effect generator, or spintronic generator, as is now patented. And 64 flight cells, 64 struts, 64 flight cells in between each strut. And this was built on land of the late Alfred Fleetwood in Berkshire, England. And there it is, looking from the bottom. And this was very, very heavy as well, but it was made deliberately out of the softest material available, ordinary plywood. And that was to silence detractors, among them many scientists who said such a device would never support its own structure, support its own weight, but it did. It's a split beam construction. It's called a split beam construction. And there's a flight cell made of wood being installed, and it was completed. And I believe this was flown from Berkshire. Clear shells on the periphery on either side to show that there was no trickery involved, and each surface, upper and lower, are electrically isolated, so you can change the polarity. And there's, let's see, Professor Surl, Gordon Goodfellow, and William T. Sherwood with his wife Rhoda. William T. Sherwood was on hand and for the video that was taken of the Adamski type craft in Silver Springs, Maryland in 1965. It's called the Rotifer UFO. Very important video. Well, it was taken with Super 8 film at that point. You can find that on YouTube. Building the Demo 1 craft. That was the last craft built in 1972-73. And there's Demo 1 about, I guess about a half a mile up, being photographed by the P-12. So P-11 being photographed by the P-12 in flight. Notice how small the land and the trees are in the distance. That's in flight. So 12-ton device up in the air like it's weighing nothing at all. And some graphics that our team did a while ago, back in 2010. And as inverse gravity rim detail, you have the thrust cell, cold flame barrier at the rim. Here's the S.E.G. And the flight cells for control are at the periphery of the S.E.G. They fire a hard rubber pin at the roller just passing. And just like touching a gyro, that portion of the craft is forced to drop at a certain angle. And if that angle is maintained, the craft flies off rapidly in that direction. And there's a closer view of the inner workings of this flight control system. It's very low tech. There's comb-shaped electrodes for capturing the electricity and a switch for turning it off or on to send energy out to electrical energy out to the rim, needle, or discharge pin. It's the flight cell. They have four flight cells, 4 flight cell modes: flight cell open, flight cell closed, flight cell open and locked, flight cell closed and locked for your control. And there's the Surl effect generator. And you have 4 switches that control where you want the electricity to go. This is an electrogravitic craft, and of course my expertise is in electrogravitics. This is right up my alley. And there's a proposed maybe 30-foot manned fighter craft. Very pleasing to the eye craft, almost like a diatom, like a microscopic organism. Yeah. That's a S.E.G. inside enlarged for clarity. The team back in the day. Try to go a little faster. Flying in Warminster, England in July 4th, 1969. The press did reams of flight footage and coverage every week. BBC One came out, Southern Television, Anglia also. Since the early 1990s, BBC One wanted all kinds of crazy money for the flight footage. And then by the early 2000s, they wouldn't even admit that any footage was taken, which insults a lot of people that are my age, early 60s, that remember the BBC shows. William T. Sherwood, who's a Facebook friend, remembers the flight footage and the BBC One TV shows on the work. So you can't fool people. So no noise, no pollution, no heat, no vibration, no consumption of Earth's oxygen, no need to carry fuel, no runways, no launch pads. We are the tomorrow people, and that's all of you, the decision makers, tomorrow's transportation today. Well, It should have been yesterday's transportation, but can't hold off these discoveries forever. Now is the time. This is Professor Surl's time now. And you can see the action of the flight cells in controlling the angle of flight. And I have in my presentation a series of 6 slides of the craft flying over Warminster, the same field in Warminster, and the action of the flight cells in controlling the craft to maintain a stable hover. All kinds of newspaper coverage, TV coverage, yet in this country, in America, nobody knows about it. But a lot of people know about it in England and Europe and across Asia. But in this country, there was some kind of news blackout on the device. Yep, day trips to the moon. Why not? The control mechanism. And those should be repeating slides. But for some reason in SteamYard, they don't repeat. Yeah, team back in the day. Very interesting. And there's the toroidal field, the aforementioned toroidal field, very important. This is consistent with nature. You have a toroidal field because of the electromagnetic polarity of the generator. The device, the generator was not supposed to fly. It was just supposed to be a unique kind of electrical generator. But off it goes. Yeah, the man who saved tomorrow, Professor John Roy Robert Surl. Before the Surl device powers our world, and then after. Nice clean water to drink and clean air to breathe. This device cleans the air as it flies. If you have one running in your home, it cleans the air in your home. Much healthier environment. Flying hotel you could have. Yeah. Plywood starships. Yep. C-57D copies the profile, but we don't want to have a dome above or below because it would be outside of the vacuum envelope. The device in flight is in its own self-generated vacuum, don't forget. Yep. Flight devices, S.E.G at the bottom, Surl effect generator at the bottom, spintronic generator. Yep. They were building them in Hollywood, and that's supposed to be a film that's on my presentations. If you go to Tesla Tech on YouTube, you can see that film also. Yeah, The Gift to Mankind. That was it. And I don't know if we have time to take a look at the spintronic slides. What do you think?
We probably don't, Russell. We might be able to come back to those. I mean, we could come back to those absolutely like next month if you want, or we might be able to do them like in open discussion time later. But
yeah, whatever works.
I might have to drag you back in here next month. But
okay.
Well, so if this was your, so the thing that I should offer to the audience, again, we have a lot of new folks. The Surl effect generator is incredibly difficult to build, and Isaiah Ritchey will be talking about that next. This is one of the, like, I don't know, the cornerstone ideas, archetypes.
Yeah, well, it's not difficult to build. It's not difficult to build if you know how. And we have pressed plates and runners down here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, based on, the exact design. And of course, the plates weren't sintered, so they fell apart. But we have runners, we have plates, and we have all this equipment in storage
Mm.
down in Fort Lauderdale area, waiting for when we get funding to go into a lab. So we're chomping at the bit. We just need people to step up to the plate and fund us.
Yeah.
We have a budget. We have a budget. We have a project plan for which is our roadmap for success, and we're ready to go.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. It's super exciting. I'm so pleased that you were able to discuss this. Again, there aren't many people who have this knowledge or expertise on the Surl effect anymore, and you are one of the very few people out there. And I mean, this has so much cultural significance in terms of anti-gravity stuff. So it's wonderful to be able to kind of show this to the audience and help them understand.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I could come on your show. Thank you so much for inviting me on and sharing this knowledge. And
let me do that. I want to. So I'm going to bring. Let me bring the guys on real quick. Let's put our hands together and give Mr. Russell Anderson a giant applause.
Wunderbar.
Russell, thank you so much. It was absolutely wonderful having you on. you ran through a tremendous amount of stuff. It is worth mentioning there have been several replications that have been completed for this, and they're like, it doesn't do what it's supposed to. Well, yeah, you didn't actually build an S.E.G. So
Thank you very much. Hey everybody. So my name is Isaiah Ritchey. I'm 43 years old, and so just a few things about myself. I was born in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. I graduated high school with an GED and immediately became an apprentice with a general contractor. I'm married to the most loving and supportive woman ever. And right now I'm just a general contractor in the Willamette Valley of Oregon, working all over the place. So let's see, my early teenage years became interested in topics of free energy, anti-gravity, all that genre of things. I followed a lot of Jean Louis Naughton's websites, did some experiments myself, and when I was 14, I helped to build a Tesla coil with the assistance of a friend, and worked with a few other magnetic devices. I had a lot of interest at that time in the topic, free energy, that kind of thing. Eventually, in my teenage years, I just gave up on the whole thing. But when I was in my late 20s, I started having like a urging in my spirit to just get back into venting, which I believe was God pushing me to do this. And so one morning in January of 2008, I had a dream showing me of these interlinking arms of energy and stuff. And I had no idea what was going on in the world with free energy and all sorts of things, because I just hadn't paid attention to it for a long time. So I got back online and started looking around, and immediately found a device I thought looked fairly simple to build, even if it was going to be a model. And that was John Surl. He had made basically a reemergence back in 2007. I was fascinated with the project and how it worked, how it was just, everything was all held together magnetically. It just had this wonderful harmony to it. It wasn't real mechanical, parts didn't wear out. It just had like a symmetry and a harmony to it, which I was very fascinated by. So within a few months, I just started looking into it with the information I could find online, and building a very basic device, trying to do something like you see on the images here. And lo and behold, I found some images that looked exactly like the dream I had seen of the energy field. So what began in 2008, making tons and tons of mistakes and lots of successes, has now become and matured into my life's work. So I'll go forward on this. Next slide. So the Surl effect generator, it basically is composed of 4 layers, in which the rollers also have the same type of layers. You have a center layer being a rare earth element, neodymium, and then an insulator, dielectric, which I'm using Teflon, and then John used it too, and then the magnetic layer, and then copper. Each one of these layers, I've learned, needs to be the exact same weight, within 1/10 of a gram each, and a scale just right to meet the circumference of the rollers. I've done all the math to figure out what those ratios are, right down to 1/10 of a gram. Using the law of the squares, determines the weight of the rollers for each layer. And the math, if you understand it right, is fairly simple. Each layer, the neodymium all the way up to the copper, gets a specific weight, and each weight needs to be within 1/10 of a gram accuracy. I've learned how to do that, and it takes time and effort, but you do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these parts. You learn what not to do and what to do to get that gram rating right. So next slide. So here's images I found online. The law of squares represents quantities of each material. Like in this slide, it shows the inner core being 4, and then the magnetic layer being 10, and let's see, that one's incorrect. The neodymium's 13, and Teflon layer's 4, and the Teflon layer's 4. It's so small here. And then the copper layer is 10. And I comprise this image below, showing the magnetic gearing. So in my system, I haven't got to the point yet where I'm doing the AC/DC magnetizing yet. I've done a few experiments with DC magnetizing and had some interesting results with that. Bending the magnetic waves in the roller rings, and it's been fairly interesting. But with a design I'm going, which is similar to Roshan and Godin, with one of the experiments I'm doing is using many sprockets inside the rollers and the stator segment rings. So that's what this lower diagram shows, is sprockets in the rollers. Here's a picture of the sprockets connecting to each other with north on the top, south on the bottom. Now the roller has basically two fields on it, one going north on top, south on bottom, or flipped around. And then you have perpendicular fields, thus the sprockets that I've been putting into the roller segments. So you have fields going this way and fields going this way, perpendicular magnetic fields. This is an image I found because I had a dream. John Surl explained that it's a magnetic matrix to me. So I just want to show this, and it's something to do with the magnetizing is like this. Here back in 2008, I was machining the Teflon part for the rollers. And this is my first roller. I used nylon at this point for the insulator instead of Teflon. And then ceramic magnets for that magnetic layer, and then obviously copper. And here I was just testing out the very first electromagnets to pulse basically a demo unit. Here I was testing the eddy currents on the stator copper band, and it worked fairly well, even on just a standard roller magnet with standard magnets inside. Nothing fancy yet at that point. Here's some of I made up to 12 of these rollers. They're just standard magnets. Nothing back then. There was nothing different about them. Just run the mill. The ceramic magnets I ground myself with the lathe and the grinder to get the circumference right. This is my first unit back in 2009 I made, and the only thing interesting I found about this unit, even though it's just normal magnets, one side, typically the bottom side, would be a little bit warmer, and the top side will always be cooler. And I held this to many people. I'd even let it stand up on end when it was not rotating, and people would hold it, and definitely you had one side was warmer than the other consistently. It was kind of odd, and I never measured, unfortunately, but I let lots of people handle it, and they'd always say the same thing: is one side was warmer than the other. Here's one of the electromagnets, the very first versions. This was a micro version I made in 2014. I just did it because I wanted to emulate Tony Stark's arc reactor. Some of the weights were right, and others for the rollers obviously were not. I just matched the weights for the main stator unit. Now, this was when I first started changing the field on magnets, and you'll see the bare neodymium magnets on the stator there above, the above image. Those were magnetic rings you could get off of eBay or Amazon. So I got them because they were cheap to experiment with. And then this lower image is some forms that I used to impress magnetic fields onto these, and thereby shaping and changing the shape of the field within the magnetic ring while keeping it magnetized. And it did present waves, and it looked like almost whiffs of smoke when I would rotate it. And I think I showed the device. Oh yeah, this little green gizmo here would rotate it at about 1 RPM. And with the film on top of it, you could see that it did indeed change, create a flux line on the magnetic field. And this above steel and copper is the device the magnet ring was inside of. And I sent it to a buddy down in California, Russ Grease, and he did all the magnetizing for me, and we did about 20 different examples, and each one had some interesting results in it. And so that's just a slide of the magnetic viewing film over the ring as it rotated. And so you can vaguely see a squiggle in there. Some had a real sharp line, others were completely flat, depending on the voltage we used. Here's one of the stator units I still have today, and that was being machined out on my lathe. And that's the magnetic layer that I machined down to get the weights all matching right within 1 gram on these. So this is not the final weight, but getting close to the final weight on the stator unit, the copper band. So it's one of the scales I have, one of 4. to get the weight down to within 1/10 of a gram accuracy. So, you know, you use 800 grit, 1500 grit, and 3000 grit, and then a nice polish to just work on it and work on it and work on it until you finally got that exact weight just right. So here's one of the rings being worked on, getting the copper to be 7 grams, 7.000, and it just takes time and effort, but it is doable. I've gone to the route of getting it manufactured in China, and they can get them pretty close, but to fine tune them just like a tuning fork, you need to stick it on a machine of your own and just do all the fine tuning myself. So that's what I'll be up to soon. This is some of the circumference values I was putting together back in 2017 and one of the finished stators. That version I still have, I just don't use it. The inner core, the weight was done wrong. When I finally machined it, realized one of the calcs was wrong. So a lot of machining experience, but otherwise it really became nothing. So in 2018, one of the first segments for the rollers was done. Now on this one, I was experimenting with nickel 200 and then Teflon and then a magnetic layer and then the copper. The next is the finished, I think it's the version 4 and of the stator S.E.G unit. This one's finished, so all the weights are within 1 gram of each other. Now this is a nickel core and then solid Teflon, magnetic layer, and then copper. And this has no special magnetizing. This was just put together to be testing motor ability. Here's when I started conceptualizing putting perpendicular fields, watching more of Surl's videos and understanding kind of what he was talking about without the special magnetizing equipment. I just haven't got that knowledge yet at that point. I'm still working on it right now. But my idea was to put perpendicular magnetic fields along with having your north and south through a ring magnet on for one of the rollers, but also having what I was going for at that time and still would like to do it is 34 points of magnetism around each ring. And then, you know, you get 8 rings total, makes one roller. Here in 2021, I finished assembling all of the 12 rollers with all the parts they need. And the magnets came pre-assembled from China, so I didn't need to work on those, but I was just putting this together to basically test the motor function, not the actual Surl effect in this, because there's no special magnetizing on these. Image below is a custom-built capacitor bank, and the top is a pull-out drawer with the 10,000 volt, 10,000 amp capacitors, and I used for some small experimenting with magnetizing, which had some interesting results. And that's in the shop here now with me. So this I began with Jared's help, Jared Yates, and designing magnetizing coils, and we were just basically just playing around with designs and figuring out what to do, what not to do, because I've looked and looked, and maybe there are books out there, but I've never come across one that really describes how to build a decent magnetizing coil. There's plenty of companies that can do it out there, but I was looking for something very unique and couldn't find anything what I was looking for, and especially trying to get perpendicular fields on ring magnets. So this is just one of the magnetizers on top, and this is basically below is an assortment of most of them. Here's 4 of my units I put together. The one at the bottom was version 2, and then the one with the Teflon is version 6, I think. I'm losing count on this. And then the far top is version 3 is the far top, and then version 4 was next, and then version 5, which is being worked on right now, which I have pictures of soon. This is one of the magnets me and Jared worked on, and we ended up magnetizing about 6 rollers with all this design work on it. So what you're seeing is a colorized version of magnetic film, which I have that here. And you can get this on Amazon, but the colors represent the strengths in the fields on the magnets. So with these tests, we were able to put 6 equal points of magnetism onto the magnet, and 6 dead zones, basically. So the fields would go, you'd be strong and they drop, and they'd be strong and they drop. It would deviate the compass, and it would do the exact same performance we would see like at Surl Magnetics. They had their rings magnetized, and it would jet forward and stop and jet forward and stop on a sheet of metal, and mine did the exact same thing. So basically, it's like a magnetic gear of sorts. So we put a number of rollers together and put them on the test run. Didn't see anything too abnormal, except at certain RPMs, they would try to float off the surface. So that's one of the things that we found occurred far too often, is that they would start to levitate. And I'll continue on here. So this is version 2 and version 3. Now this was about almost a year ago now that was on version 2, and I'm presently beginning work soon on version 7, 6 and 7. Version 3 is still up and running, and it can get up, those rollers can get up to about 200 RPM. It looks pretty, but it doesn't have any kind of unusual effects because it is just standard bought magnets, no special patterns yet. But I'll be getting to those soon. Version 2 is up on my wall looking pretty, and it could only maybe do 50, 60 RPM. It was just the very basic model. As for version 3, it could get up to about 200 RPM. This was the first, it's an unmagnetized magnet, uncoated, 34% neodymium, and then the rest is iron and boron. I got that manufactured for myself, and then ground it on the lathe to get the weight correct. So this is my first trial run with using something with neodymium in it that was uncoated, and I still am using that today in one of the S.E.Gs. So this is version 5, because the version 4 never went anywhere. So version 5 is the magnets are 104. I think it's 104% larger in capacity. Much greater power levels can be put on this one. And one of the errors I made in this device, which I'm working on right now to fix, I want to try and experiment using radially facing stator magnets. And so instead of the fields being north and south, and then south and north on the rollers, I wanted to do like north this way and then south this way. Conceptually, it seemed like it would work great, except where the joints were in the magnets, the rollers would quickly stop and get snagged up. So one of the things I learned was just don't do that type of field arrangement. So I have magnets right now that I'm about to put together in the next few days. That'll be the standard north up, south down, and the rollers be south up, north down. So it'll be tested on this version 5 assembly with the electromagnets, and these I run them. They don't get hot, they don't overheat. The only issue that I've found with this system is that the rollers want to float off. They hit a point where, which I've heard from Roshan and Godin, they experience the same thing. S.E.G just made a video a few months ago, in that they experienced is when the unit would start to go cold, is that it would get really quiet. And that is one phenomenon that I have experienced, is that at a certain point, you can physically hear that the roller gets real quiet and it starts to float off the surface. But the issue is those electromagnets were so sinking close to the roller, it would hit them. So I worked with that system for a while. It looks great. It functions well, but it can only hit a certain speed until the roller wants to float off the surface. So, which leads to my next version. So, okay, let me continue here. So this is the version 5 looking good. I haven't changed out the stator magnets yet to the traditional style magnets, but that's soon coming. Now, the next picture underneath is a platform I built completely from scratch, and I bought a CNC motor along with a rotary indexer and had it put together at a shop for me so that I can mount each roller magnet underneath the CNC motor and precisely rotate it at however many holes I want to put in, whether it's 1 hole per ring or up to 17 holes with the 1/8 inch wide sprocket magnets I've been putting in there. So that pre-drills the hole, and then I come into a water immersed tank and then finish it off very, very slowly because this just sprays a steady stream of coolant onto it to keep it from sparking and starting fires, which they do. Those neodymium magnets love to start on fire if you're grinding them. And they don't smell good either, I can tell you that. So this is a system I built from scratch. The above is a more closer view of the ring magnets being drilled for sprockets. So I start the hole there, get the point pre-drilled, and then go underwater and finish it off. And the brass tube is spraying coolant water onto it. And so it keeps everything under control, and everything's very, very precise in the way it rotates. So everything's very dialed in. I can get however many holes I want to do. My ultimate goal would want to use smaller sprocket magnets and put 34 points. But the ideal thing for me would be to actually magnetize those points on, not having to use inserts like Roshan and Godin did. The below segment is version 6, S.E.G version 6 that I'm working on presently. And it's one of 6 stator magnets. And so basically I'm putting in a program to match the magnetic field on the rollers so that when the rollers go over, they are also interacting with the sprocket magnets on each stator. So what you see here in this bottom image is me manually putting in those holes. I'm doing this for experiments only. Eventually I want to have a company do this for me that is far, far, far more precise. Ideally, I would love to have these just magnetized into it with no sprocket magnets whatsoever. That would be a dream come true. And I think it is possible. I just got to figure out how to do it. So yeah, that's all underwater. I do that. That took, I think for all 6 segments in those holes was about almost 40 hours of work. A lot of evenings working late. So this was an earlier design. This is my first magnet using the sprockets to see if it could even be done. And it's this ring right here. It has 17 equal points on it, or mostly equal, because it was all done by hand before I had the machine set up. 17 points of magnetism. And each one has a 0.125 by 0.125 inch neodymium magnet glued into it to represent points. So you have perpendicular fields. This is the design you could see with the segment rolling across green film, magnetic viewing film that's green. And you can see it leaves people can zoom in there, but it leaves a really clean line. And within that line is tiny little squiggle marks, which you see in the bottom image of those magnets leaving a loop effect. One of the experiments I'm going to be trying soon is flipping the polarities to see if you actually get the up and down, up and down, up and down, which it might do that. I'll just have to experiment and see. So that's one of the segments. I'm eventually going to be doing 6 rollers, and each layer on each roller will have this pattern on it. So with what I've come up with is varying strengths from, so you have basically not to the naked eye of looking at it, you have a wave field, even though that squiggly line is an up and down. The strengths represent a wave. And so what you see on this Gauss reading, we put together, me and Jared, I gave him the strengths and values, and then he jotted down on this chart, I think it was Google Sheets, he put down basically what it looks like on a graph. And starting at the top, you have the N55, and it goes all the way down to an N38, and then loops back up. So basically, as the roller segment rotates, you're having the strength of field going out perpendicular. You're having it going up and down and up and down, and these things are rotating thousands of times, hundreds of times a second. And yes, so this is just one segment of 8. Ideally, I like to do all 12 rollers in time, which I eventually will, just to see what effect it generates. So this I did And this is the 17-point sprocket magnet I went through with the rotary divider and a Gauss meter, and measured every 5 degrees. I took a measurement, and this basically plotted out the course for those sprockets to see which ones were strong, which ones were weak, what it actually looked like using Gauss readings. So I took all those measurements. You can see on the far left-hand corner or far left-hand side, all those numbers, computed them all out and put it into a radar view. And that's what it came up with how magnetically the roller looks with a Gauss meter. Okay, so this is something new I'm coming up with, and it's this here. And what you're looking at is a part out of one of the rollers. On the left side, that is it is 99.9% pure neodymium mixed with a small amount of resin. And it's my idea, we talked with Jared about this, to basically make an electret with this. And while these are curing, I may have to add another element with it, but do more further testing. I made a custom-made Van de Graaff generator just for this purpose, is that while these are curing together, that you electrify it. And so you make this into, not only is it neodymium, it's compressed, it has a tiny bit of resin as a binder and a sealer. This I made last year, and it has zero degradation, none at all. It's been perfectly preserved. So it would electrify it with static electricity to basically form an electret. What I'm going to be doing is making a ton more of these to fit the rollers. So each one of these rollers will have this charged, positively charged, and then the main neodymium element inside the stator will also be the exact same thing of using a tiny bit of resin along with a mass quantity of pure neodymium compressed. And so the resin goes within all the mixture, coating it and also binding it together and protecting it from oxygen. Jared and me believe that it may have to run the experiments, but it is a way to create an electret with it. The version that you see on the right side is just a unmagnetized blank of neodymium magnet. Has no coating, there's no magnetic field on it. I got these just for test samples, not for magnetizing, of course, but because they have around 33 or 34% neodymium in them, to test them and see how the rollers respond with any cooling effects, any weight loss, which eventually will rig up a system to test for weight loss. Right now, I'm just focusing on the motorability and getting the rollers up to 500 plus RPM and watching for cooling effects. This is the press that I'm using to press the neodymium, these parts together with. So you just put in a drop or two of resin and then compress it inside the Teflon ring. And then while it's drying on top of that piece of acrylic, you would set it inside of the Van de Graaff generator. That's a closer look up of it being compressed. Let's see. I believe one of my slides does show the Van de Graaff. I'll get to that soon. So this is an image I finished up last night. And the pattern on the stators is the pattern I'm doing on my stator magnets. And I found a drawing online of this, something that it looked like John Surl had worked on. And so I've just gone to do it manually, putting sprocket magnets in these positions, obviously on north on top, south on the bottom. And then you have the top is the stator magnet pattern. The middle point is the rollers from the strengths going up and down, then back up as they rotate. So you can see the roller is one full revolution, or the circumference of the roller is basically strength in 8 layers all put together. So the top one's a stator magnet pattern. The middle is the roller's magnetic pattern. And then I superimpose them all together so you can see the roller on top of the stator and roller magnetic pattern overlay. So I finished that up last night, and that's what I'm gearing up to do. Now, these rollers here, if you count them, they have 16 points, not 17. I'm doing this to try different numbers. I've already built the 17, which I might eventually do a roller with 17 points. Might do one with 1 and then one with 6 and 12, but the numbers are important. I just don't want to just try random numbers. So this one is one with 16 points on it. So my apologies, I didn't show the Van de Graaff generator, but I'll bring it over here so you all can see it. I have it sitting right over there. So what's next for me in the next, between now and 2025? What I'm working on is finishing up version 6, the stator for version 6, with the new sprocket magnets, test for cooling and possible weight loss. Use the new 99.9% neodymium with a resin binder for the core pieces. Complete one full roller with the sprocket magnets and test for how far up the RPM can go. Test for cooling and possible weight loss, and then begin construction of the all-new version 7, which right now it's just theoretical, and weight loss and values as described by John Surl. Test for cooling and possible weight loss. I have the math done on version 7 for the stator and the rollers, so everything will be done according to the law of the squares, using them to make the rollers exactly precise again. And then the stator will follow them also. I'm going to be doing a little bit smaller on the rollers, and this is the stator a little bit smaller. And this is another thing I'm exploring is Dr. Paul Brown's device and replicate the magnetizing process. I've located one of the companies that is actually 20 minutes from me that made some of the magnetizing components for him back in the 80s, which was interesting to find out. And then my bigger goal be next year is begin construction of the second ring S.E.G along with 22 rollers, probably still using the sprockets, but it all depends on the success I have with them and their performance, how they behave. What I'm ultimately looking for is that they don't fly off, and that's the big problem I have with the pulse electromagnets, is that they would fly away. They would hit the electromagnets and then just cause a chain reaction and hit all the other rollers, and they would just come to a stop because they would be trying at a certain RPM to float off the surface and get smacked. So let's see here. And then, begin construction of the second ring and the rollers. I have suppliers in China that can make my components very, very precise and very close to the values that I need. So all I have to do is very carefully fine tune each component just a little bit to get it within that same gram rating for precision that I need it to be manufactured. So let me go get that Van de Graaff generator because it actually adds a little more something I want to add to this. So this is the one I built from scratch. This has obviously you have the dome. It's only a 6-inch dome, and I get about 3-inch sparks out, which is exactly what I need. And it's obviously way too overpowered for what I need. This part here will be the charging platform where the neodymium discs, step back here, the neodymium discs, these guys, I'll cast them and then set them inside. So it's charged with static electricity and have it timed so that it keeps the field here charged continually until they dry. I'm getting slow dry resin, so maybe 32 to 36 hours until full cure. So they're just saturated in that high voltage field for a very, very long time. This took a lot of work. Now, the one thing I discovered about this that I found very interesting that parallels this work with Teflon is that this Van de Graaff generator would not charge up the positive energy needed to produce a spark unless I used Teflon, a Teflon roller in the top. I was using a Teflon roller for the rubber band in the Van de Graaff generator to try charging it, and it would kill it every time. I would have the wrong voltages, and there would be nothing accumulating in the top dome. But when I switched and had a Teflon roller in the top and put a nylon roller in the bottom, the thing went wild. It started affecting the TV. Parts all around the tables were electrified. It was a shocking experience to get it to work so well. My apologies. I thought I had a picture of it here loaded on these slides, and it doesn't appear that it did load. I'll go back through. Maybe I overtalked it. No, it's not there. That's weird. I did have it on there. Okay, so there is the one version I'm working on, which is a carousel, and I'll just briefly take this over here and show you guys. I took pictures of it and put it on a slideshow, and for whatever reason, it didn't come. So this is the system for controlling it, RPM. It's all controlled by batteries. I don't have it directly wired in. So this one of these will read RPMs, battery charge, and also monitoring temperature of this. And this is the carousel. And you have the rollers inside. So I can mount any of my S.E.G units inside here and then test it for RPM. If you look, let's see, there's a camera. If you look here, it has magnets, kind of like Roshan and Godin did, but their rollers were mounted. I didn't want that. I wanted these rollers to be free to orbit where they wanted to go, not where I would determine them. It's something me and Jared have come to believe, is that there is a secondary magnetic wave that when these things are rotating around, then in spite of one going one direction, the magnetic wave is also traveling another. So I wanted these to be free to maneuver and oscillate and vibrate as they're orbiting around, as you can see here doing that. So I built this carousel with the magnets here. And so they basically gently push the rollers around. So far, I've been able to get these standard magnets. These ones do about 200 RPM. These are the old ones. I got new ring magnets here. They're quite a bit more powerful, and I've gotten up to 460 RPM on them. Now, this is an old version with only N32 magnets. They're considerably weak compared to the ones that I have now. I have N52 with all the sprockets. So my hope and goal for this device is when I put the new unit in here, I'm trying to shoot for 550 to 600 RPM and watch as the rollers, float. But the one thing I've noticed on those is about 450 RPM, the rollers do lose their sound. And it's quite amazing to hear that the sound just goes down, I would say, by about 1/3 to 40%. 30 to 40% loses its sound as the velocity increases. So that is the stator unit. It's one of the originals that I'm not using for tests anymore. Be testing version 6 probably by next week. It'll be coming through. I'm going to be wrapped up and be able to put it on here, spin it up, and actually test for the first time true real readings and get these things floating on the surface. This will be the first time ever using sprocket magnets with this new stator, and I'll get a roller assembled with sprocket magnets in it. So it'll be the first time to actually get it up and running, which will be probably a matter of just weeks now. So that is it for my presentation. And it went a little faster than I thought. But thank you for having me on here. And I'd just like to thank again the Lord God for guiding me and introducing me to all the people around here, just hooking me up with people I need to be. It has been my life story with this work. I've had so many times where literally one time I walked into a building and I was thinking about positively charged elements like the neodymium. I walked into this building in Portland and they're giving a lecture about positively charged elements. There's been many, many, many times, and Jared is one of these people that I have ran into so many roadblocks so many roadblocks with questions and obstacles and can't figure things out. At one point before I met Jared, I was actually seriously just thinking of giving this whole thing up because the things there were so many things about it I didn't understand. And I prayed one day, and 2 weeks later, I was literally sitting right across from Jared at a wedding event. And we hit it off and we've been great friends ever since. I also like to thank my wonderful wife for all her support in this and everything she's given me and her insights. So that's it for me right now. Thank you for having me on here again.
Yeah, well, Isaiah, thank you. So let me bring the guys on. First things first. And we still have Russell with us. Maybe we can get you guys to chat. I think that's everybody that we have. Let's put our hands together and give Mr. Isaiah Ritchey enormous applause. We're pushing forward with the builders today, so which is really exciting. But that's my summer project too, is builder stuff. In fact, I probably won't have time to see you this time, but if I come back down to Jared's in the future, maybe come down and get some photos of your stuff and do an interview and all that.
Anytime.
So, yeah. And then you and Russell are probably familiar with each other's work, right? To some degree.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I know Russell's been a mainstay for. Russell's muted.
Yeah, Isaiah, I'm not familiar with your work, but I love your work. Your work is just top notch.
Thank you very much.
We need more young people like yourself doing this.
I appreciate that a lot. I've listened to your YouTube videos countless times, Russell, and the ones you've done decades ago, I've listened over and over and over.
Yeah. Well, it shows in your work. You've really absorbed the material, and I wish you all the best of luck in reproducing this device. And it's incredibly simple but infuriatingly complex, as you can see.
Tell me about it, right?
You're looking for elements to go into it that are negative, highly negative on the triboelectric series. Basically, what you want is almost like in radioactive materials, a critical mass of neutrons. In this case, you want a critical mass of electrons. So you want negative charges, basically negative charges flying all around, negative charges coming out of the ether, negative charges forming Cooper pairs and boson pairs, and incredibly high voltages. When you're dealing with the ether, electrostatics is everything. The ether is non-physical, so you can only affect it electrically.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yeah. The Surl is, I mean, again, I can't stress, for me, it's cultural importance, right? But like when I first got into this, you've got T.T. Brown, this was before, I mean, you had like when I first started getting into this area in the 90s, you had Eugene Pogklenoff. This was really kind of before Ningley and all that stuff. So you had Pogklenoff with the rotating superconductor, and that was really new and nobody knew anything about it yet. And then the two that people did know about were T.T. Brown, right? And I know, Russell, you've built tons and tons and tons of T.T. Brown stuff.
Built and flown since 1990. That was 34 and a half years ago. And the time just goes by so fast. And I'm getting old. I'll be 63 at the end of the month. So we need more young people like Isaiah involved.
The other giant one, and I remember somebody gave me a VHS. It might have been you. I don't know where I got this. I got a VHS tape with a Surl presentation on it, and that was that's giant, right? Surl is, and one of the things that gets me is like it goes above and beyond the design itself. It's like he helped to define. When people think anti-gravity, right? It's like wheels within wheels and the whole 9 yards. Like a lot of that goes right back to Surl. So he helped define that, like that archetype for, okay, well, we've got an anti-gravity drive. What's it going to look like? Like their mind goes back to Surl. It's been around that long and it's that important, So
yeah, wheels within wheels, like Ezekiel in the Bible. Ezekiel saw the wheel within a wheel. And this is basically a very, very, all those UFOs that we see and they're filmed by regular folks and the military are nothing more than flying electrostatic generators. This propulsion flight means it's fundamentally electrostatic. But when you talk about the generators, you don't have to supply anything external, any fuel. The only thing external comes from the environment around you, and that field strength is just off the charts. The ether is non-physical. It's Lorentz invariant in non-material ether. So this is our source of gravitation. This is our source, and electrostatics is our source of inertia or no inertia in the case of the Surl and Brown devices. And so basically, we can build our UFOs, we can build our starships. All we have to do is just get some people together, get some money together. That's the main thing, is the funding, and get like-minded people together, get them together for 3-4 years and watch some amazing things happen, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and then collecting these anomalies too. And Isaiah, you mentioned some of those, right? It's like warmer on one side than the other. So even with yours, you've seen a ton of anomalies, right?
That's very important, because that temperature change is indicative of an ether conversion.
Yeah. What were
That was interesting. That was the very first unit, and it was always like that. It was always warmer on one side and cooler on the other, no matter whether it was spinning or sitting. It was always a temperature
That's very
difference.
important. That's highly significant. So I love your work. You're on the right track.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
What were some of the other? Could you run through some of the other anomalies that you've seen with these?
So lately, it's with the certain RPM. I've witnessed this many times, and I was like, maybe it's just me, and it's just the RPM, and they're about to fling off. But when I listened to that interview with S.E.G Godin, that got put on YouTube about a month and a half ago, he would say the same thing: is the rollers would get quiet, the whole system would quiet down at a certain RPM, and then it would start to get cold. I was like, oh, that's what I'm hearing too, or no pun intended, but that's what I'm observing, is that at a certain RPM, about the 450 range RPM, the sound just goes down.
Of course, yeah. And one of the most striking characteristics of genuine UFOs is their utter silence.
Well, so then there was what was the other big one? I'm trying to remember his name. And
there was a guy in Russia, the Black Sea, Mr. Delphin. He had all those videos, which are still on YouTube, fortunately, and he had an incredible setup, and he worked on it for a very long time. But one of his very last videos, he bought a solid chunk of neodymium, and I emailed him about this before he's gone. He's completely gone now, but he bought a solid chunk of neodymium for his machine and put it in there and spun it up at about 450 RPM. And within about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, it not just got cold, it went below freezing to negative 17.5 C. It got real cold. Then he stopped the unit and wiped frost off of it. And my jaw I had to get it off the floor. I was shocked. Like, that's more confirmation what Surl was saying, is when this was operating, it would get cold. It wouldn't warm up. It was incredible.
Yeah.
That shows it's following the principles of energy or anti-energy from the late Colonel Thomas Bearden. T.E. Bearden talks about energy and Tesla technology, Tesla scalar electromagnetics. Everything works in reverse. And it shows gravitation and inertia to be fundamentally electrical. And you have the falling temperature gradient and implosion. That's straight from Victor Schauberger. Of course, he produced anti-gravity devices too.
Yeah. So Russell, then going back to, and again, for folks who aren't familiar with it, so Sergei Godin and V.V. Roshan, and I believe this was the 90s, mid to late 90s, they did an experiment, the Godin-Roshan experiment. You alluded to that a moment ago. So what I remember reading about theirs, again, they changed the design. One of the problems they had was they weren't sure how to magnetize it. So if I remember correctly, they drilled holes in the magnets and inserted cord.
Not in the magnets, actually, and they were nylon runners, and they drilled holes in the nylon runners and put in actual magnets. That basically made the magnetic Max cell. No, it is. They were trying to copy that design, but instead of magnetizing it that way, which we came up with a methodology for doing that with a robotic arm and a print head. Basically, they put in little magnets, which is kind of ingenious, and it worked.
Yeah. Now, so from what I understand, and this goes back to their paper, and so folks can look this up online. But again, the Godin and Roshan experiment, they saw self-spin over a certain RPM, where it
Yeah,
started to
over a
spin
very
itself
low
faster.
RPM, like around 500 to 600, between 500 and 600 RPM, which is not very fast at all.
Yeah,
So
and then
motor,
I believe they also saw it running cold, right?
yes, it ran cold. Pressure drop, a candle flame would go out if placed in the middle. That's total Surl effect. Magnetic walls, that's Surl effect.
Yeah.
And then weight loss, the thing lost most of its weight at a low RPM.
So then the other one was the Morningstar Energy Box, and that
Yeah,
was Paul Murad and
Paul
Joan
Moran's
Brandenburg.
device. Yeah, Morningstar.
Yeah. Now,
That's Roshan Godin.
and I talked with Paul about that several times. The issue that they had was, again, the machining was not easy for them to do, and they changed the design considerably. They made several changes, but they saw transient weight loss, and again, the challenge they had was because this was a big, heavy device, and it wasn't perfectly machined, so it was bouncing around, right? So what he had said was they had this on a set of 4 different scales, and then they had to average out the weight of those scales, and that was one of their challenges. And he said that they had several considerable instances of weight loss, and if I remember correctly, in many of those, they weren't sure if that could have just been an error, right? It was shifting from one scale to another, and they weren't calibrating correctly. But he said that they did have one major event of weight loss happen when it got to a certain RPM, and they were able to check all of the scales, and they all had the same reading. So,
And it was a low RPM. The actual Surl device operates far faster than that. And then you get full weight loss and beyond. Not only weight loss, but inertial loss, a loss of inertial mass. That's very important.
now, if I remember correctly, and again, there are lots of little, and Isaiah, you would probably know as well as anybody, there are lots of little gotchas. Like, for instance, I remember reading, Russell, you talked about pressing the neodymium. You can buy neodymium that's already machined, but if you try and machine it yourself, you were saying you have to use argon.
You have to do it in an argon environment. What we do is we have powders
Yeah.
at like 425 mesh, 435 mesh, and all the powders are consistent size. We want jagged edges on the powders, not round, not square, but jagged edges on the powders, and have them all very, very, basically to the point as if they were released in oxygen, they'd flash into flame, basically, especially the neodymium. So you want to have everything very, very as fine a powder as you can get, and then combine it in a turbulent flow of argon, and then press it in the molds with maybe 200 tons of pressure. You're aiming for around 7 grams per cubic centimeter of density.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very important. You want as dense and heavy magnets as you can get. The denser, heavier magnets work better. And then, you want to coat, if possible, coat everything. I like your idea, Isaiah, of having everything, well, the neodymium, especially in resin to protect it from oxygen. And, they're still great. That's really important. That's a great manufacturing technique. But yeah, Paul Brown also did everything in argon. That's very important. You want to do everything in argon, especially for the neodymium.
That is right. That's another. And you know what? I'll have to put this online sometime. I have, and in fact, I think several. This is around, right? But yeah, Paul Brown built an S.E.G in the mid 1980s, and he's no longer with us. But I have photos of his S.E.G. And I have, I believe, some notes that he had written about it.
I would love to see those photos if you could pass them on at some time.
Yeah, let me find those. Let me find
I
those.
would love to see those.
Our former company president, Phil Tauber Jr., was part of NewCell and part of Paul Brown's company. And he joined up with Paul Brown basically to fund the work. And after he started the S.E.G, the wiring associated with it just blew up, burnt up, because there was far too much power going in to the wiring than the wiring could handle, because this is a device about the size of a large, thick telephone book, and it was producing, they figured, something around 1 megawatt at low RPM.
Yes,
1.2 million watts. It was insane.
Yeah, exactly. It's totally insane. Yeah, that's totally insane. Think about what we could do with that much power in a small space.
That
Yeah,
was
I
That's
just
the
that was
on that.
power to power whole communities off the grid.
that was in
80
Brown's notes. Yeah,
Yeah.
83 American homes is 1.2 million watts could power about 80, because an average American home uses 12 to 15,000 watts. You
Exactly.
could run about 83 American homes with that one unit.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and I remember reading
Mind-boggling.
that in his notes. I remember reading that he hadn't anticipated the energy output, and it literally melted the device down.
Yeah,
And
it always produces more energy out than they anticipated, even from the very first ones that were built in 1946. The nominal voltage was about 100,000 volts, and then it just kept increasing.
yeah. So the other thing for me that's interesting, and I think it's important to mention this, is again, like APEC brings people together, right? But you and Isaiah haven't worked together in the past. Paul Brown was working independently, Godin and Roshan were working independently. And for me, it's important to look at these are all independent replications where they're working from the same notes, but they're not working together and they're seeing the same anomalies.
They're
That's
seeing
interesting.
anomalous things. That's very important. And the most important anomalous thing is that the device violates Lenz's law. That's a hallowed law of electromagnetic power generation for generators and motors. It violates Lenz's law, and that's huge. That's huge. And the fact that it also produces cold instead of heat. Now, in Lenz's law, you get heat. You get the opposite in this. So it's totally consistent with the principles of an energy as delineated in Tom Bearden's works on Tesla scalar electromagnetics.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that I know, like, Bill Alec has been studying that.
Yes.
David Chester has been digging into Tom Bearden's work lately, so,
Yeah,
it's
I've been reading Tom Bearden's work since the mid 80s, and it is right on the money, in my opinion. And he wrote a lot about Floyd Sweet's anti-gravity work, about
yeah,
Russian scalar interferometry, Tesla scalar interferometry, all these incredible things, anti-gravity, force fields. Basically we have everything we need to have Star Trek type technology right now. We just need to get
I
people
talked
together
to
in one place to build it all.
I spent many hours on the phone with Tom Bearden, but as Bill has mentioned this, he held back a lot. He always held back a
Oh,
lot,
yes.
and so but I
For
do remember him
safety, for safety.
I believe it.
yeah, so, he yeah,
Look at how much power you produce.
And my feeling was too, just from talking with him, that he put more. This was just me, but he put more in writing than he said, and so yeah, it's easier to learn from him reading his work as opposed to looking at his interviews and stuff. But
I have a lot of his books and video presentations, and a lot of them are on YouTube now. Everything's online now. Also, I recommend OdySee Cars, Utron, Ralph Ring. I first met Ralph Ring in Holland at the Global Breakthrough Energy Movement First Conference. Breakfasted with him and his wife every morning.
Lucky you.
Yeah, it was incredible. He actually rode in a manned version faster than the mind of man can conceive, much faster than light, almost like a kind of teleportation. So you can see that these type of craft can easily go to other planets and stars in a reasonable time and economy. When you're flying through space, you're not getting any heavier with increasing speed. There's no time dilation. So you could take a jaunt in a Surl craft to Alpha Proxima Centauri, take a couple weeks, month flight, to Proxima Centauri 4, and then come back, and everyone on Earth will be no older than you, but actually you will be slightly younger, because time has passed a little faster, because instead of you're living in 1G on Earth, inside the craft there's 1/2 G onboard gravity.
yeah. Now,
So
Russell, do you know if is Ralph still with us? Or is
no, he died. He died a couple
okay.
years ago, unfortunately.
See, and
No.
that's one of the challenges in this community is like, and one of the things that I hope our conference can do is help preserve the history of this. I mean, if nothing else, it gives people more to work with in the future. But yeah, we've lost so many people, and not just here, but I mean anything relating to warp drives, field effect propulsion, inertial propulsion. So many people have passed, and it's just the heyday of that type of engineering was quite a while ago. So
Well, that's why we hope to bring in as many young people like Isaiah as possible to come back into the fold and help us out. And Isaiah, I would love to have you on our team, with the new effort. That'd be awesome. And we're down here in
Thank you.
Central Florida. Our company president is in Central Florida. Spintronics is located in North Palm Beach. And our late president, Phil Tubbert Jr., lived in Fort Lauderdale. And his son lives in North Palm Beach, and that's where Spintronics is based now. So
Yeah.
working
Well,
here
and
in
then
Florida.
and Isaiah is working with Jared too, and Jared's in Oregon. And again, Isaiah, I would love to at some point. I would love to come down and try and get some footage for you. If you're open to it.
Completely. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that there is a new generation that is coming up, and I think that like they're able to benefit from a lot of the history that's still here, but there's also new stuff, right?